Okay, here's one of those that I've been needing to do for a while now. It seems like since March, so I'm like 7 months back on some of these things. It should have come out before I even did the origins of Neptune. And what prompted me even to do it now was that I had a regular ask me a question, and I answered him back and forth a few times, and then all of a sudden, like you may have seen me say before, I feel a video coming on because I felt like I just really couldn't answer him and give a broad enough answer to really correctly answer him without probably making a video. Typing it would be almost impossible. Voice inflections, showing him certain things. We could go on for weeks. Or I could make a video, and everybody could benefit from this because it's a topic that is kind of near and dear to your heart, whether you know it or not. It's about Phoenicians and the ancient god of the Canaanites and the people that were around the Mediterranean and Anatolia, all the way to the edges of Egypt and past a little bit there for a while before that got deviated. So let's look into this. This is El, a simplistic name, but it is his name. It's a god's name. We know of many gods' names, of the Sumerians and the Akkadians, Greek people and the Romans, which connect to it and so on. And I've tried to show so many connections between them being the same gods and goddesses and actually being in the same position, doing the same things, and having a similar name, or the name's meaning means the same thing. It's crazy to really break it all the way down and figure out that it came from something that was connected not too long before any of this was ever written down. Like, if they would have had writing a few thousand years before, we would have a whole different thought. People talk about the Library of Alexandria, but I don't think this was necessarily in there. Linguistic specialists have figured out that it goes back, traces itself back to Proto-Indo-European roots, and everywhere from Sanskrit to Old English and Irish, German, everything sweeping all the way through there has one type of linguistics. There's another, of course, with Shemitic and Hamite, but then there's another theorem among linguistics which connects that actually too. Now, these ancient Phoenicians, get it out of the way, called themselves Canaan. So you hear about the Canaanites, and then you hear about the Phoenicians and all this stuff. Well, if you look back before that, you hear about these people called the Natufians, and so on, and it's much more important to realize how things went and progressed through time than people give credit for too. But sometimes there are key points, situations, things that you could be shown that actually clicks on another light. And all of a sudden you understand things in a different way. I'm going to try to do that right now. El is a deity. He's the major god of the pantheon of the people of this whole area. Indeed, it's found all the way into Sumeria, when it's Babylon, if you will, through the whole Fertile Crescent, all the people of Anatolia. Show you some connectives here, but sometimes it's not as evident as you would think. El, also known as Il or Al. In Ugaritic, it's showing you here a symbol, which is, of course, hieroglyphic writing, or cuneiform, really, sorry. In Phoenician, it shows up to be an L-type symbol, which looks like a line with an angle that's on it. There's an angle rather than an angel, but next to it is what looks like an A, but it's on its side. Well, if it was turned upwise, it would look like a bull. And if it was turned up the other way, it would look like an A. Reading backwards, as they did, that's Al, or L. So there's other symbols they show here. It's cognate to Akkadian, where they show this symbol that looks like an asterisk somewhat, and strong on the left-hand side. And that's the Dingir symbol from Sumerians, so it's God. And they try to tell you that this just meant God. And in some ways you can see that they say the God of this and the God of that. And they use that along with it, but it's because they're all connected to El. Otherwise it wouldn't be there. Understand well that no matter what anybody says from the future, if there was a God named El, there wouldn't be people using that as epitaphs trying to definitely diss themselves from that. Would there be? El, or this apostrophe L, it goes along with concepts like will and somebody's will. For it has ill connected to it. And they show there after the asterisk of Akkadian, Romanized or italicized, if you will, is Ilu. And Il is connected to this. It's a Northwest Semitic word meaning God or deity, referring to as a proper name or to any one of a multiple ancient Near Eastern deities. Rare forms are Elah, as in God's Elah, represents the predicate form of an old Akkadian in Amorite. The word is derived from Proto-Semitic Il, but if you look, they have star, shepherd's hook, Il, meaning gods. Funny that it comes out that way, that shows the people that know the stars and the shepherd hook and their gods. Specific deities are known as El or Il, include the supreme god of the ancient Canaanite religion and the supreme god of East Semitic speakers in Mesopotamia's early dynastic period. So again, through the whole area. When they try to pin it down, or they try to say Phoenicians were only one place, understand that all of these people were Phoenicians. After a while, different things happened. We're not really there or going there now. In fact, we're going to go in the Wayback Machine here in a little bit. But right now, we're in a time before the biblical concepts come out. Before the Job and things like that, before they ever got taken into captivity, and the Deuteronomy and things like that, before all of this, this was the God of the Canaanites that they talk about in the Bible that they wanted to go take over in the Promised Land situation. Right? Well, El and Al, so you can get Allah from that, by the way. So that's not so weird if you know that there's connectives. And of course that works off the same Bible, the same concepts. But then again, where does it all come from? Back to this guy. Back to this deity. Back to this Canaanite religion and its whole pantheon. So let's get into this a little more. Cognate forms are found throughout the Semitic languages. They include Ugaritic with Ilu, or M, Phoenician Il, or M in Hebrew, and El in Hebrew. Plural of that is Elim, which we find in Elim or Elohim. Akkadian is Ilu or Ilanu. Now, El is something that people have found is all over the Bib-El. You can find remnants of it in the Temp-El or a Chap-El. These people talk about angels, not angles, but angels. Their names are Michael, which is Micah-El, Raphael, Ariel, Gabriel. It's quite illuminating, Elu, to find out some of this knowledge. It's the root of illumination because it brings light and knowledge. It has a lot to do with it because this is all based on sun worship in the first place. For El is really that sky father that we talk about so much. And we're going to talk about how Jupiter and Saturn and all that works together with these concepts here. For we talked about recently, Dios Pater is actually Jupiter. And that actually has to do with Iapetus, which is Japheth in the Bible. And the connectives there, and how Noah, after the great voyage and deluge, turned into Uranus and got castrated. And that's what the whole weird thing about them, I couldn't see him and covering him up, and then him cursing and so on. And he curses Canaan for some reason, doesn't he? Let's get into this a little more, and I try to illuminate you as it goes. We could talk about how much El is in the Bib-El. For a long time, I had a thing written down that was 3 pages long that was just full of them. Would you like some more examples of words that we even have modern day or that are in the Bible that you understand come from that? Let's try one. Ezekiel. You've heard of Ezekiel. All these names mean something too. Have you ever heard of Elijah? Well, Yah is a short form of Yahweh. And his name actually means El is Yahweh. What? Oh, snap. Hold on. That was just a firework. That's just the starting. Bealiah. People know that name too. It's a prophet that was in there, but that means Baal is Yah. And Baal is this guy's kid right here. The land was named after him in ancient days. Things have gotten changed somewhat, but sometimes things don't change as much. We know of a modern day place that used to be called Asia Minor, called Turkey today, but in ancient times, and we still refer to it somewhat as Anatolia. But that was named after his daughter, Anat. There's something else I can get into about shortly, but because this is going to go into a multi-parter if I don't shut up and start talking about what's on the page here. In Northwest Semitic use, El was both the generic word for any god and the special name for the title of a particular god who was distinguished from other gods as being the god. In fact, in Latin, El means the. In fact, looking back at El and Al, it's where Allah comes from. No, listen, it's where Al comes from. It's the All Father. who art in heaven, that great sky father that we all know about. It's the same thing. But it's all about him and everything that came from that. We'll get into more. In some Canaanite and Ugaritic sources, El played a role as the father of the gods of creation. However, because the word sometimes refers to a god rather than the god El himself, it is frequently ambiguous as to whether El followed by another name means the god El with a particular epithet attached to or referred to another god entirely. For example, in Ugaritic texts, Il milk is understood to mean El the king, but Il had as the god Hadad. And so what is this? Well, it's from El in the first place, and he's the all-father God, so it comes from him directly, but also things are facets of it. So it's an all-in-one situation. Hadad, by the way, if we look at it, well, it's a Sumerian god, is a storm and rain god. You see that triple-pronged up and triple-pronged down thing that he's holding, other than a hatchet that's right there, and that's that symbol, whether it's been done in metal and prongs and looks like eagle claws or what, of the ancient lightning god or storm gods, right? Well, Baal has that connection too, but also the God of the Bible has that connection too. He shows up in a big cloud on Mount Sinai and so on. In fact, that changes through time, and it shows you that there was an attempted change through time, but also in the writing of the way they did everything, it shows you the connections. A lot of people have made these connections in the past, parts of this and so on. However, because the word refers to this other situation, it could mean something else, and while it does, there's that still connective, isn't there? The Semitic root al, or elah, or in Aramaic Allah, Ella, or Hebrew Eloha, may be il with a parasitic h, and el may be abbreviated form of lh. In Ugaritic, the plural form meaning gods is ilhim. In Ancient Phoenician, ilhim. So when you just put an O in the middle of that, well, they don't have the vowels. They only have the consonants there. So yeah, something's right in between there. What is it? Well, it's equivalent to the Hebrew Elohim. What is this? This is that council of gods, powers they call it. In the Hebrew text, this word is interpreted as being systematically singular for God by biblical commentators. However, the documentary hypothesis, developed originally in the 1870s, identifies that these are different offers. There's a Yahwist, there's an Elohist, a Deuteronomist, and a priestly source, and they were responsible for adding stories from a polytheistic religion into those of a monotheistic religion. Inconsistencies that arise between monotheism and polytheism in the text are reflective of this hypothesis. The stem il is found prominently in the earliest strata of East Semitic, Northwest Semitic, and South Semitic groups. Personal names, including the stem el, are found with similar patterns in both Amorite and Sabaic, which indicates that probably already in Proto-Semitic, il was both a generic term for God and the common name for a title of a singular particular god. Well, let's look at this a different way. El has been equated to Chronos of the ancients and having a whole Titanomachy situation. And very much like An of the Sumerians, he's kind of out of pocket and known to be in sky up there in heaven. Got a gray beard and all that stuff going on. And he rarely makes appearances. He's still drawn in whenever big things are about to happen and so on for his say-so and stuff like that. But other than that, he's a little bit out of pocket. And this is more equated to like Uranus and gods like that, and how Zeus, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, they killed him off and they did so and so. Yeah, that's for a reason too, when you figure out how the pantheons, whenever they made up their mythology and what had come before and already happened to these people, and they went, well, and go like that then. Some of this is really self-revealing whenever you start doing a lot of comparative religion, but let's get into some more of this and run right through parts of this here. The Egyptian god Ptah is given the title of Du-Gitti, or the Lord of Gath. Gath is where the giant that fights David comes from, and so on. So, in a prism from Tel Lachish, which has on its opposite face the name of Amenhotep II from Egypt, the title Du-Gitti is also found in Sarabidi text 353. Cross in 1973 points out that Ptah is often called the Lord or One of Eternity, and thinks it may be this identification of El with Ptah of the Egyptians that led to the epithet Olam, meaning eternal, or Ancient of Days, being applied to El so early and so consistently. However, in the Ugaritic text, Ptah is seemingly identified with the craftsman god Kothar Wa Kasis, because he's supposed to have been one that crafts man. And this is more of a Mercurian, Loki type mischievous character that's usually involved in this situation. Yet another connection is seen with the Mandean god Ta-Hil, whose name combines the terms Ta and Il. Yeah, and the Mandeans were Gnostics. Oh, that's not anything bad. That just means knowing secret knowledge. We'll get into that later here too. The name Raphael, or Raphael, meaning God has healed. This is the healing angel. In Ugarit is attested to an approximately in 1350 BC in one of the Amarna letters found in Tel El Hesi from the ruler of Lakash from the Great One, or to the Great One. These are the Amarna letters that are going back and forth, and this is the idea of Ramses the Great and so on you're coming into, and that time of the Amarna letters before that, that's around King Tut and stuff we've talked about here recently, 1350 BC, pegging that line. But there's already that entity there that's known from these people. A Phoenician inscribed amulet of the 7th century BC from Arslan Tash may refer to El. The text was translated by Rosenthal in 1969. Page 658 refers to it as follows. So notice what's the difference of these two interpretations somewhat. An eternal bond has been established for us, as Shur has established it for us and all the divine beings, and the majority of the group of all the holy ones, through the bond of heaven and earth forever. That's somebody who's trying to discount the situation. However, Cross in 1973 retranslated the text as follows. The Eternal One, El Olam, has made a covenant or an oath with us. Asherah, who's the Queen of Heaven, has made a pact with us and all the sons of El. And the great council of all the holy ones, which is Elohim, with oaths of heaven and ancient earth. It's a little different there on the second part, isn't it? In some inscriptions, the name El Kone, or Ars in Punic, meaning El, the creator of earth, appears, even including in a late inscription in Leptis Magna in Triptotalia, dating to the 2nd century AD. In Hittite text, the expression becomes the single name Il-Kunrusa, and Kurusa appearing as the husband of Asherdu, which is Asherah, and father of 77 or 88 sons. Well, the way it pegs out, there ends up being 70 of them, and we'll go into that here a little bit later, but that's also supposed to have been gods of this earth, and the 70 gods that are listed in the Bible. Whenever they delve out all of the earth, and Yahweh's portion is only this 1/70th of the situation. Well, it's not all the earth. It's all of the known lands and stuff. See, because the way that works is there are gods of certain cities that go around in certain places. Like the Sumerians had multiple gods in every city, but each city had a major deity that was over it, right? Well, they have that same effect over here too. They had it somewhat in Egypt too, if you look into it. They had it in a lot of places where it wasn't just one and all. The only people that had that really were the Greeks, kind of, and the Romans, but if you look into it, they didn't really either, and they had certain places where they only had certain temples. But they sure, whenever they spread out, took over and rebuilt some temples into some other things too. And crazily, they took temples that used to be to Inanna, and then the Greeks Diana, and turned it off into their goddess for it. It's just amazing. Or Artemis, and then Diana. In a Hurry and Hymn to El, published in Ugaritica text, and he is called Il-Bert, or Beret, and Il-Don, which is cross, and takes as El of the covenant and El the judge, respectively. Amorites, what time are we at here? Fantastic. Amorite inscriptions from Sam-Al, or Sam-El, refer to numerous gods, sometimes by name, sometimes by title, especially such titles as Il-Abrat, God of the people, or Il-Abika, God of your father, which is said in the Bible a few times, God of the Father, Al-Abini, God of our Father, and so forth. Various family gods are recorded, divine names listed and belonging to particular families or clans, sometimes by title and sometimes by name, including the name Il, God. It is likely that Il is also very often the god called in Akkadian text Amaru, or Il-Amaru. So we're getting the flavor here, but also I feel that the first little three things they go through is just meant to confuse you somewhat. And if you're on one side of the fence, you'd probably stay on your side of the fence. And if you're on another one, you'd probably realize what they're talking about. For the Canaanites and ancient Levantine religion as a whole, El, or Il, was the supreme god. Father of mankind and all creatures, he also fathered many gods, 70 of them supposedly, most importantly Hadad, Yam, and Mot, each sharing similar attributes to the Greco-Roman gods. Zeus for Hadad, being that lightning god that we're talking about, Poseidon being the god of the sea, with Yam, which is the sea god of the ancient Canaanites. But wait, it's in the Bible too. In fact, whenever he's supposed to defeat the Leviathan and everything, it all connects to that. And also having parted the river and the seas has something to do with it also. We'll get there a little later. And Hades with Mot. Mot is the god of death, and they defeat the god of death, and so it allows the ball cycle to return, and he's reborn, and there's a rebirth situation. Every year there's a celebration for it. Just like Jesus, it's amazing. Whole springtime event hooked up to it. Yeah, it's right there. It's because all of these cattle people had this all done before this ever came about. Whenever they had cattle, and they had everything else, but they didn't have writing. And then sure, it vibrated and became their own little stories. The mythologies twisted somewhat and became different, but even a lot of these people realized they were the same. Like the Greeks I keep showing you, where they are self-equating. They go, yeah, that's this because he does this, and then it's just like that. They didn't sit and equate all of them to it. And you can't equate all, but it's amazing how much you can, and especially the heart of it. And that's why I say that connective goes back to a time before it. As recorded on the clay tablets of Ugarit, El is the husband of the goddess Asherah. And you can find, if you'll look up Yahweh and his Asherah in Google Images, you'll see these clay tablets and this symbol over here where it actually shows a bull god and his wife, and she's sitting down reading the paper and shit, and his kid, what's that? That's El and Asherah, and that's Baal. But in a different way, that's God and that's Jesus, and that's his wife that's just a dove nowadays, I guess. Or Asherah got turned into a pole that they held up the tent with. There are no real temples to El that we can find, and everybody thought that's weird until they finally found this cache in Ugarit, and reading through the tablets, he only lived in a tent because he's from a time before they started building walls and things, at a time like 10,000 BC, or came around that time we're always pinned on talking about, and he stayed in a tent. Well, if you'll look in the Bible, and whenever they go to Sinai, Moses, and the whole 9 yards, that everybody's real familiar with that part, there's a tabernacle. It's a tent, and that tent is held up by an Asherah pole, they call it. But that's cognate, actually, to monolithic poles that are found in Egypt, like the ones that we have. Oh, well, even in the Pope's area right there around the Vatican, there's one that's set up like a sundial right there in the middle of it. Same situation, but it's no longer made out of a sacred wood and holding up the big tent like a circus. It's actually holding up, well, it's now stone. But back in the day, there's a lot of things in the Bible about sacred wood, and I've made a bunch of videos about that. So let's just continue on. Where we at here? 33. 3 pantheon lists are found at Ugarit, or Rosh Shamra. That's where really the cache was found. We begin with the 4 gods, Il-Ib, which according to the cross is the name of the generic kind of deity, perhaps the divine ancestor of the people. El-Dagnu, that is Dagon. That's where we get the fish hat for the Pope too from, by the way, and so on. And Baal, Sapan, that is the god Hadu or Hadad. Though Ugarit has a large temple dedicated to Dagon and another to Hadad, there was no temple dedicated to El. Well, I was supposed to say that after. Well, that's because there was. They were always just tents, so you don't find anything anymore. You might find some post holes when the circus comes to town, and then it leaves. What's left? Not much. El is called again and again Toru El, or the Bull El, or the Bull God. In fact, through the time of Taurus, he's definitely referred to that. He is Batiano Benwadi, or the creator of creatures. He's Abu Bani Ili, the father of the gods, and Abu Adami, father of man. Abu Adami, Adam, father of man. Sounds familiar. He is Quinyanu Olam, the creator eternal, The epithet Olam appearing in Hebrew form in the Hebrew name of God, El Olam, God eternal, in Genesis 21:33. He is Heteku, your patriarch. El is the gray-bearded ancient one, full of wisdom, Malku, king of the gods, or king. Abu Samima, father of years, ancient of days. El Gibor, El the warrior. He is also named Liputin, or of unknown meaning, variously rendered as Latpan or Latapan or Lapani, which means shrouded face in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which means he is the hidden God that's now hidden, veiled. That's one of the things I do on this channel, is try to break through a veil right here, and I think it's just amazing that Wiki has now got things like this on there. And of course people say, oh, you can't trust Wiki. Down at the bottom, you wouldn't believe how many professional people are listed under every single one of these paragraphs down below. You can't just go on there and wiggity wiggity. No, it doesn't work that way anymore. This was only the 10th of this month, June 2021, was redone now. I don't know what it looked like a month ago, but I do know that 2 years ago, whenever I did my other video about El, I had to fill in all of these blanks. They were still trying to be vague at that point, and I had to take 3 or 4 places just to try to show it to you. Some of you are still with me on the channel and remember it. El, father of heaven, Saturn, Chronus, Saturn, El, and his major son, Hadad, father of earth, Jupiter, are symbolized both by the bull, and both wear bull horns on their headdresses. So where do we get these horns from? And I was a little kid first finding out this stuff. There was still memories of watching Fred Flintstone, and they had the Grand Poobahs, and they had these purple hats that they put on, with buffalo horns onto them, like buffalo hats, the Grand Poobah. And then you started seeing these Sumerians and stuff, and I'm like, what? That's way before any Viking things. Then later you find out the Vikings rarely did that. There were some other people that did, though, and you can in fact see them do it in the crash of the Bronze Age there, and the Sea Peoples have a lot of people that have these horned hats that look like this on them, and there makes a connection to who a lot of these people were. But let's just continue. But Bull, and Bull of Heaven, the God of the Bible, is also referred to as a king or a bull, and so on. And then you find in Aries, everything changes, and they start sacrificing rams, which happens right at Sinai. The signification of that right there. But also you notice that he's got a whole bunch of new laws, and he gives you 10, but then Moses smashes them. But then if you'll read on all the laws that are after that, it's pretty wicked. And there's a lot of other things in there that you probably never knew. Strange things that go with lifestyles that went back then that of course are no longer evident. But so El is Saturn and Chronos, and it's the reason we have Saturday, and his son Hadad is Zeus, you see, and the lightning god, the storm god, just like the other people have a storm god and a storm god, and they all fit in that same way, and they end up being the king of their little pantheon. Well, why? How does that all go with it? Because they take over the part from their Father who art in heaven, and it's the Son, so it's Yeah, and it's the sun too, by the way. But it takes over for their dad and so on, and tries to make, fix everything. And it sounds so Jesus-y, doesn't it? Well, it's kind of where all that came from. One of the questions I was asked is, Jesus really a Phoenician? Well, it's a whole lot deeper than that, and he's not really Phoenician. See, because the Bible thing started off in Sumerians, but then there's these ancient beliefs of all the people in the Fertile Crescent, and if you really get into it, they kind of envelope it all together. And it's weird. It's kind of man's quest to find God and what not to do, and they flip-flop back and forth quite a few times. The weird thing is, if you watch how they flip-flopped, before the flood they were all in Sumerian type things, but then it changed, and at Melchizedek and Abraham, they're in this type of religion. So whenever he finds God and it's supposed to be all that, that's not it. Or is it? Or does it get twisted in? No, In Canaanite mythology, El builds a desert sanctuary with his children and his two wives, leading to speculation that at one point El was a desert god. People have said weird stuff like he was a desert god, or he was this, or he's that. Where you think of there as being a desert, actually, at the time that he was started up, there was no desert there. There was no desert there. He wasn't a desert god in the first place. He was a sky god. And when these two people got together that had sky gods, they came up with this father-son thing, and it had an idea with father and son, but it is brother and brother, isn't it? And they built a mythology where they kicked their own ass and fixed everything and came together. And then there ends up being this son that takes over from this apocrypha that happened before, and it's a new thing, and it's all about lightning and storm gods. Yeah. So we're at 42 now. Let's see if I can read this next part and get this in right before it switches over. It's kind of interesting, and I probably have a lot to say after it, so maybe we'll start the next time with that. The mysterious Ugaritic text, Sakar and Salim, tells us how perhaps near the beginning of all things, El came to shores of the sea, Mediterranean, and saw two women who bobbed up and down. El was sexually aroused by and took the two with him. He killed a bird by throwing a staff at it, or a throwing stick to kill a bird, and roasted it over a fire. He asked the women to tell him when the bird was fully cooked, and then to address him either as husband or as father, for he would thenceforward behave to them as they called him. They saluted him as husband. He then lay with them, and then they gave birth to Shakar, which is dawn, and Shalim, which is dusk. Again, El lay with his wives, and the wives gave birth to the gracious gods, cleavers of the sea, children of the sea. The names of these wives are not explicitly provided, but some confusing rubrics at the beginning of the account mention the goddess Atharat, who is otherwise El's chief wife, and the goddess Rahimiao, otherwise one of the womb, was otherwise unknown. Atharat can be cognate to Anat, or a mother of Anat. So there's that idea that someone's handmaiden, someone was the true queen, the other one was the handmaiden, and da-da-da. There's a Bible tale that tells the same thing about Ishmael and all these things. But instead of trying to put it all on gods, it tries to put it onto a people and have this weird story go all the way through it and make connectives. We're going on to part 2 in your top left-hand corner now. We'll see you there. Like, share, and subscribe before you go, if you aren't already.